So today is Sunday, the 20th of July, 2025. Thank you all for being here to listen to my Dharma talk. The title of the talk today is, I've called it Our Core Practices, Part 1. So I won't get through them all today, and I'll finish this talk in a month's time. But I've become more aware of the need to try and articulate what our core practices are in our particular Zen lineage. We could say that the path of our Zen lineage, that's ordinary mind Zen, is found in the 4 practice principles in an abbreviated form. Caught in a self-centered dream, only suffering, holding to self-centered thoughts, exactly the dream, each moment, life as it is, the only teacher, being just this moment, compassion's way. So I will expand on those 4 practices and try to put them into a sense of Zen practice. So the practices I'm talking about, I've inherited from Joko Beck and, of course, my own teacher, Barry Magid. And I have grouped these practices under 3 headings. So the first one is just sitting, and you're all familiar with that one. The second grouping I've called becoming aware of our curative fantasies and core beliefs, and at the same time cultivating an increasing capacity for self-acceptance. And the third grouping I've called relationships and mutual recognition, including working with the precepts as relational guides. So let's start with just sitting, in Japanese shikantaza. So ordinary mind Zen, if you like, we bring a psychologically minded approach to the Soto Zen tradition of just sitting. Just sitting, in a way, is the performance of Shakyamuni Buddha's realization that life is already perfect, whole, and complete, just as it is. In some ways, it requires faith to just sit. Performing that kind of realization that our life is perfect and whole, just as it is. So we share with Soto Zen the emphasis on a non-instrumental approach. That is, it's not a means to an end. We're not trying to practice to get somewhere. The practice itself, the just sitting itself, is the expression of the realization of Buddha. Sometimes it's called a no-gain practice, which dovetails perfectly with the gradual realization in our practice of just this moment is it. We're not seeking some more perfect or special moment in the future. Just this moment is fundamentally and fully what our life is all about. This just sitting practice is what Barry Magid calls in his first book a bottom-up practice, to distinguish it from the top-down practice of koans, where the student is encouraged to practice working on the koan intensively with the goal of achieving a kensho experience. In contrast to this, just sitting focuses on the gradual development of the capacity for a radical acceptance of life just as it is. And we believe this kind of style of practice has a much better chance of avoiding the traps of spiritual bypassing. That is, the use of spiritual beliefs and practices, for example, to bypass the legacy of psychological trauma or difficult emotions or issues we may have. Through the ongoing practice of just sitting, our capacity to tolerate and be with life just as it is increases. And it also increases our tolerance for processing difficult emotions or psychological traumas and anxiety. Just being able to sit with it. On a psychological level, we could say we experience this as a deepening of self-acceptance or self-compassion. Being able to accept difficult emotions or states rather than avoiding them or dissociating from them is developed in our practice. Even being able to accept our busy minds just as they are. So this also extends to our capacity to tolerate and accept the vulnerabilities of other people in our life. The greater our ability to accept ourselves usually extends to a greater acceptance of others. The more non-judgmental we are of ourselves, the more non-judgmental we usually find we are of others. So rather than working through a koan curriculum, students in Ordinary Mind Zen are encouraged to work through what Barry Magid calls our curative fantasies, which, like koan practice, can take many years to wear them out. The ultimate curative fantasy, of course, being some idealized version of what enlightenment is or is supposed to be. The integration of relational psychotherapy into Zen practice gives our practice a very unique flavor, which would not necessarily be recognized as Zen by Zen traditionalists. Not only is our sitting practice much less intensive than in traditional Japanese training, but practices such as dokusan, or private interviews between teacher and student, are more psychologically focused, rather than focusing on passing koans. And we do not claim that we are teaching a more authentic Zen Buddhism. Neither do we claim to have the correct understanding of what the historical Buddha actually taught, or indeed what the ancient Chinese Chan masters taught. Although we study these traditions, we are very much aware that we are reinventing the tradition, shaped by the time and place and culture and professional contexts within which we live and work. I will now reflect on the psychologically minded approach we take in Ordinary Mind Zen, in particular on the way in which we can integrate an awareness of curative fantasies and core beliefs with our just sitting practice, leading to healing the injured parts of ourselves and the growth of self-acceptance. So in a way, our just sitting practice is the foundation of our practice. And from our just sitting practice, we integrate our psychological awareness. So becoming aware of curative fantasies and core beliefs. It is inevitable that when we first begin a spiritual practice, it will take the form of the pursuit of something which we think is missing. Invariably, we will be motivated unconsciously by an old core belief of some kind, some version of there is something wrong with me, or I will never be good enough, that developed during our childhood years as a result of relational trauma, to seek what we believe deep down we are lacking. Our core practice is to become aware of this movement of always seeking something outside of ourselves we believe we are lacking. During her years as a teacher, Joko Beck added the practice of thought labeling to the practice of just sitting. By patiently noticing our thought patterns, we may get a clue to what our underlying core beliefs consist of. We may begin to illuminate a core belief of, for example, I will never be good enough, and how our emotional states, such as anxiety or depression, form around these core beliefs, and also how we might develop certain strategies at home or at work in our relationships that are designed to protect us from the pain of re-experiencing these core beliefs. Barry Magid introduced curative fantasies into our practice in his second book, Ending the Pursuit of Happiness. Barry also integrates becoming aware of our curative fantasies into our just sitting practice, because invariably it is very difficult for us to simply just sit. And the pursuit of curative fantasies or gaining ideas arises as a resistance to just sitting. They are the manifestation, if you like, of the unconscious desire for permanence or independence, or versions of trying to control the uncontrollable, which is almost a universal human longing. And they go to the heart of our suffering, the resistance to life as it is. He says that one way to describe the teacher's job is to illuminate and then undercut the student's curative fantasies over and over again. Whatever the student thinks is missing, there is nothing missing. Whatever the student thinks they've gotten, they haven't gained anything. Whatever the student thinks the teacher has that they don't have is entirely a projection. It's usually only by wearing out our curative fantasies after many years of practice that we finally arrive at finding our home in the reality of just this moment. When we are first starting Zen practice, it is very difficult to understand the claim that life is already perfect, whole, and complete just as it is. That we are already perfect, whole, and complete just as we are. We generally enter Zen because of the desire to get some relief from suffering. So we invariably start by seeking solutions to our problems outside of ourselves. Curative fantasies start at the fairly mundane level of worrying out what Joko Beck calls our if-onlys. If only I had fill in the blank, I would be happy. For example, if only I had my dream job, I would be happy. If only I found my soulmate, I would be happy. If only I owned a house, I would be happy. Or sometimes they take the form of, I'm waiting for fill in the blank. I'm waiting for my real life to begin sometime in the future, to quote the Scottish-born Australian songwriter Colin Hay. For example, I'm waiting for my kids to leave home. I'm waiting for my first novel to be published. Or I'm waiting for the day I've paid my house off, or the day when I retire. Or sometimes the if only takes the form of, if only I could get rid of fill in the blank, some part of ourselves we hate or feel ashamed of. Joko Beck claimed that not one of us isn't, to some degree, still wearing out our if onlys. And then she says something very interesting. She says, first of all, we wear out those on the gross levels. And then we shift our search to more subtle levels. Finally, in looking for the thing outside of ourselves that we hope is going to complete us, we turn to a spiritual discipline. Unfortunately, we tend to bring into this new search the same orientation as before. Most people who come to the Zen Center don't think a new Cadillac will do it, but they think that enlightenment will. Now they've got a new cookie, a new if only. If only I could understand what realization is all about, I would be happy. If only I could have at least a little enlightenment experience, I would be happy. Coming into a practice like Zen, we bring our usual notions that we are going to get somewhere, become enlightened, and get all the cookies that have eluded us in the past. That's a quote from the first chapter of Joko's first book. So if we stick with our practice, we start uncovering various curative fantasies of what Zen practice is going to do for us. You could probably discover your own versions of curative fantasies, and I would encourage you to do so. Barry Magid has now diagnosed 9 curative fantasies. Here are some examples. Vowing to save all beings, -1. Denying ourselves compassion in the pursuit of being the perfect Zen Buddhist. Always putting the needs of others before our own needs. A form of self-sacrifice, often which maybe sometimes women are more vulnerable to than men. Leapfrogging. The idea that spiritual experiences will help us transcend our emotional difficulties. Like the autobiography of Lou Nordstrom, who experienced the hope that that big enlightenment experience, the Kensho experience, would alleviate all his psychological difficulties. Another one can be the idealization of teachers. Probably not much chance of that in our Sangha, but creating a situation where we feel our teachers always have something we lack, or creating a situation where we lose our ability to be critical of the teachers and ethical behavior. So this notion of the guru on putting the teacher on a pedestal who can do no wrong. Another one Barry talks about a lot, and you find often, sometimes in Zen and sometimes in other spiritual disciplines, pure awareness. The fantasy that I get caught in for quite a few years, actually. The teaching that who we really are is not our ever-changing bodies, thoughts, or emotions, but a pure state of consciousness that is eternally blissful and unchanging. Another one, immaculate perception. The belief that after enlightenment, the enlightened person sees reality directly, just as it really is. And finally, the big one, the fantasy of enlightenment, which is usually imagined as some special, unchanging state in which all of my problems will be over. The fantasy of enlightenment becomes the biggest barrier to enlightenment because this can't possibly be it. This moment can't possibly be it. We need to liberate ourselves from all these ideas of enlightenment once and for all. After practice, which is spiral and linear progression, we enter into something that Barry Magid calls post-enlightenment practice. Our sitting is now performative or enacting of just this is it. In post-enlightenment practice, we are no longer pulled around by the idea of enlightenment, by our sense of lacking something. This doesn't mean to say you've had some wonderfully big enlightenment experience to be practicing post-enlightenment practice. It just simply means that continuing seeking and desire for something else has more or less been basically practiced through. You've more or less worn out that fantasy of this can't be it, of this very body, this very person, me can't be it. So in post-enlightenment practice, we are no longer pulled around by the idea of seeking for enlightenment, by our sense of lacking something. As Barry says, we're simply staying with our mind as it is. We're simply staying with this moment just as it is. We're no longer on the track of anything. We're no longer engaged in some means to an end project. We sit as though we have arrived because we have, which is a good description of shikantaza, the Soto practice of just sitting. Just sitting is leaving everything alone. It's performing the realization that there is nothing missing. So I'll stop there and